Welcome to Through the Corporate Glass, a podcast that explores career choices. We dive into the latest trends in tech careers, demystify industry roles, spotlight startups, and even explore unconventional paths outside the industry. Join us for authentic conversations that will challenge your assumptions and inspire you to think differently.
Hi everyone, I am Deepa, your host for the episode. In today's episode, we are going to be exploring the world of enterprise IT, the kind of problems you would solve, and what to expect if you were to work in this industry. To talk about this, I have with me Vinod. Vinod Sharma has over a decade of experience in enterprise IT and is now a product manager at Google. I have always enjoyed my conversations with Vinod. I like the way he describes the world around us. Welcome, Vinod. Glad to have you with us today.
Happy to be here, Deepa.
Let's start with an easy one. What is enterprise IT? How would you define it?
Although you said it is easy, it's actually quite difficult. Enterprise IT is the software arm of any business that helps to run the business effectively. And the other thing that stands out in enterprise IT is that they are not the most important revenue generating component of the business. What I mean by that is that they're not necessarily, not always, there for making money, but they help to make money. I think that's how enterprise IT has been there, and the definition is evolving as we speak.
Sure. Can you give me an example? A simple one.
Sure. So let's take any random example. In this case, let's think about a company that makes, say, guitars. And in this case, the enterprise IT would be accountable for ensuring that they make software that helps the business run. They want to sell the guitar at a effective price. And they would also want to ensure that the employees who work there have access to the best tools, items available for them to do their jobs well. And in this case, it would be that you have systems in place that help track slash lower the cost of components, systems that ensure that manufactured guitars sold or sent and tracked effectively, customers are cataloged and maintained so that you can continue to build the relationships. Typically, whatever items that you need to do to run a business, odds are that you will have a digital slash IT arm tracking it. So in this company, enterprise IT is responsible for all of that, and on top of it, we'll also look at ensuring that the employees of the guitar company have the access to the best tools, best softwares, and so on and so forth. A very easy example there is in the course of the pandemic, people had to work from home, which meant that you had to be accessible. Things that were taken for granted, like physical access, security, etc., had to be ported to the digital world. And in this case, I think IT or enterprise IT's mandate was to ensure that people are able to, access their work, collaborate digitally. That could be through a suite of tools, or that could be through a suite of changes, and so on and so forth. And that's what I meant by keeping employees happy, because all the systems have companies have appraisal systems and payroll and finance, all the other supporting stuff. All that good stuff comes with enterprise.
All right. So, how would you compare this with, say, IT services?
That's a good question. IT services is actually a good partner for the enterprise IT companies. Typically, crudely put it, service companies are, they form a large pool of, options available for the enterprise IT company to help get things done. So what that means simply is enterprise IT is actually a large customer for the service industry, and they typically partner. I'll give you an example. So let's say in this case, this guitar company wants to, have a video conferencing solution available. For you, it's easy to think, hey, you can look at Zoom, and it's funny that Zoom actually came to the vocabulary because of pandemic. But at an enterprise scale, you would have your different user ID and password, and for people who worked on single sign-ons and so on and so forth, it's not the most easiest. It does look like user ID and password, but it's not. So you have a lot of things that go behind. So in this case, a service company will come and say, hey, you know what, we've implemented, some Zoom variant of a corporate software, and we've done it for other companies. Let us come and, help implement this for you. Or for instance, the guitar company would not have actually staffed so many people who would have, worked on networks, telecom switches, routers, and so on and so forth. So they'll say, hey, service company do you have? Do you have a solution for me where I can effectively bridge my communications type of a software setup? And so the enterprise IT teams typically look at that and say, all right, let's go get this done. What is the best rate you can provide? And that then becomes an interesting conversation in and of itself. But typically, that's what service industries do. They consult in terms of solutions, and then they implement and go ahead and get that done. So the implementation forms the bulk of what a service industry does, but consultation also forms their top of the funnel tech.
Do you think at some point the IT org contributes to the core business?
Sometimes it is direct, sometimes it is indirect. And the ratio of direct to indirect is actually 1:99. And because you keep in mind that this is by design, this is not by choice. Everybody would love to contribute to making money, and everybody does it in their own way. And enterprise IT also does it in their own way, where they are essentially a means to an end, and the means for them is how do I make things so that I can do things faster, better, and so on. But here, the catch is that you are, although you can say that you build systems to ensure that your operational costs are lower, what in finance is called as G&A, but then attribution of whether the software made things better is where it gets a little tricky. In your own personal context, think of the number of times you have downloaded a to-do list app of your choice, and how many times has that you've actually used it, you've used it well, but can you claim that the to-do list app has made you more productive? It's subjective, right? So I think enterprise IT also has the same problem at a much larger scale, and when it is at a sufficiently large scale, it becomes so confused and convoluted that it's indistinguishable from the real impact, which is why attribution is hard for enterprise IT to make a direct contribution to revenue.
Sure, sure. So let's talk a little bit about the kind of roles that exist in this industry. So talk about some of the roles based on what you have seen so far.
Sure. So again, the best way to look at roles in enterprise IT is to divide them up in different phases, and typically that would be along the tenure, along the lines of employee tenure. So if the employee is fresh, they would need a different. They would have different roles. They would need different skills. The employee is sort of mid to senior sort of a career tenure, then they would also need different skills and they would have different roles. And as you go towards the more seasoned executive, same framework. So typically, again, my sample size is fairly small, and approximating for industry always is tricky, and it has to be considered with some caveats. But mota moti, largely it's the same. The junior person who's essentially fresh out of college, you essentially learn how to solve a specific technical problem in the language of or the system of your choice. So the thing with enterprise IT and service company is that instead of fundamental computer science languages which are geared towards making your own software, writing your own software, you essentially at an enterprise IT or a service company, you are already given those sort of Lego blocks. I think the immediate up level is to get to mid. One of the things that you do in junior entry level roles is you are writing your technical implementation or system implementation. And then you eventually do enough of that over time that number one, boredom kicks in. Number two is that you want to grow and you want to be the big person, right? And typically, organizations have a way out for you to scratch that itch, and that's that middle manager career path or item where the role is essentially you move on from building or implementing a technical solution to ensuring that work is done through the team, and you would have had sufficient context over time to have understood how various pieces of the puzzle work together in a fairly broad manner. What I mean by that is that as you start implementing, you will slowly start getting exposed to new ideas, different systems, different Lego blocks, and so on and so forth. And as you look at different Lego blocks, you start thinking about, hey, how do I mix these things together? Does that make a little bit different? Can I work with a Lego block company to ensure that I change one specific setting for that suits my needs, so that I don't need to reinvent the wheel? Or should I even think of building my own Lego blocks? Hey, because that sounds cool. And at that point in time, your mid manager, mid role evolves into getting things done, and the skills needed also sort of change, because you are no longer responsible for doing it, but you're accountable for getting things done. So I think that's a typical path. And of course, you get into managing teams, managing people. That's a whole other ballgame as well.
Right, right. And that when you move on to executive, I think that will be a huge portfolio to have. So, what would an executive do?
Yeah. So again, so same law of averages. You Once you level up from a mid manager, you essentially get bumped into the executive bracket, and then you start. Now, the problem that you want to solve is, neither are you responsible for getting things done. You are accountable for that module, but actually you don't want to be there. You want to essentially be informed of what the hell is happening on what is there, and you start thinking about what is it that why do we need to hire so many people? What is it that we need to do? How can we make it better? So an executive typically starts thinking at a more abstracted level, saying, hey, in 3-4 years time, maybe this is where we need to head to, for various reasons. It could be as an enterprise IT team for their own business, where their business is heading. If, let's say, for instance, if the guitar company suddenly sees that a great opportunity, not only making guitar, but let's say making a harmonium for what it's worth, then they suddenly start thinking about, oh, can the existing guitar solution or other things that I need to track for guitar, can it work for harmonium or not? If that needs to work for harmonium, how does that, since you've already seen the life of what does it take to do the solution for that, and then manage the solution for that, you start thinking, oh, how do I extend it to other things? What you need is what I call a balance between idealism and being pragmatic, because as you've seen implementations, as you're responsible for implementations, you'd have developed your own personal bearing of what that principle looks like for you, or what is your own moral compass of what is right, what is not right, what is cool, what is uncool, what we should do, what we should not do, why we should do things, why we should not do things. And often you find as an executive, you're at a crossroad of taking things that you should want to do versus taking things that you see you need to do. And I think balancing that is extremely critical for any executive. Good executives do that very well. Poor executives learn, by trial and error. So the skill for an executive moves on from technology or something to understanding a little more broader, maybe understanding the business, maybe understanding where the market is going, maybe understanding your purpose of why it's there. People will start looking at you for attribution and so on.
See, when we walk through these phases, though it looks pretty linear, I'm sure there are some growth hacks you can talk about. So, let's go a little bit through that. What does a growth hack look like?
Awesome. So in this case, I'm assuming that the growth hack you're referring to is, as an employee looking into an enterprise role, how do I hack myself into either junior better, mid better, executive better, right?
Right, right.
Now, if you think of it from a system level, you essentially play the game by coming as a junior employee, going to a mid level, and going to an executive. One way to do that is, to why do you have to come to a junior level? Why don't you start from a mid level, right? So people essentially have that hack where they look at some masters or some other advanced, add new skills that are relevant to get through. People actually, you may also say, why don't I just directly get to an executive? And the answer for that is, you start your own company. So you are the CEO. So you will see a lot of CEOs these days who are 20-year-old, 25-year-olds. Again, they have hacked it through to whatever thing they are. Of course, they'll not be the CEO at scale, right? So that's the other way of looking at it. The third thing that you want to look at is, you want to understand what makes the organization tick. There are some implicit and unsaid rules of an organization when they want to promote or when they want to move people down. And that could be not only adding new skills, but also interpersonal relationships, Some people also call it as office politics, but I disagree, because working with people is something that people have not been taught too well, and that is because you are at a collegium system where everybody levels up the same way, irrespective of how they do, as long as they meet a minimum bar, is what has been taught to us. And in organizations, it doesn't work, at least at face. On an average, if you do well, your rate of growth will be slower as compared to a person who does better. But mentally, you've not moved on because you're still in the collegium system of, hey, we've cleared the minimum bar of making it there. After that, the system should take care. So the sense of entitlement kicks in. So people who hack growth are essentially people who understand that game quicker, and they try to understand the organizational pulse. The last way to do that is essentially to look at trying to be creative and trying to solve things, or trying to ask um, slightly different questions. Because at the end of the day, if you think of what an executive does, is they ask questions like, why should we get there? Now, the quality of the question or the quality of the answer doesn't depend on the number of years you are in. It depends on how deeply you've thought about it, or how what information you have in terms of access that lends you to answer that question better. I think those are some of the things that I've seen so far. We may be more, but yeah, these are personal anecdotes.
No, that's a good summary. I know the effort that you put in to get into a better context of where you are operating, right? That makes a key difference. And yes, entitlement does creep in. The more years you spend, sometimes you get to this feeling that yeah, the system will take care, but it's so not automatic.
That is true, which is why I said the sooner people realize, the better it is for them.
Right, right. Yes. So if you were to tell somebody who is coming in what they should expect in terms of the nature of work, or what should they be prepared for in terms of mindset, what would it be?
Yeah. So again, the way to answer this question will also be dependent on where they want to enter. So the fact of the matter is that the world in the next 15 to 20 years is undergoing a significant shift for working in environments, collaborating together but not being together. That means selling something to someone, and that something may not be actually a physical good, maybe a service, maybe a combination of both, maybe everything. That would mean that selling in new virtual means of items that are available. So there is a word or jargon that is used for this. It is called digital transformation. What that typically means is investing in the next set of digital tools to make magic happen. Now, in this case, magic has become a necessity, and that means that you will have a lot of these roles coming in. So people looking at enterprise IT as a career, they're actually an interesting thing to solve, because it's very exciting if you like to see how technology solves a business problem or business problems. And if you're really passionate about solving for that and getting things done, I think this is a good place to be in, because uh, the moment um, the moment you think about, I mean, do the thought exercise to yourself. What does it take for you to start a business, to submit your reports to the government of India in terms of tax? The thing that you as an individual would have thought through is, let me use clear tax or whatever your tax software is, or maybe go to income tax and get that done. But for a business, it's actually quite difficult. And then you start understanding, oh, how do I do that? Or you do a thought exercise of, how do I, if I were a grocery store management, how do I do point of sale? How do I ensure that I accept Google Pay? And how do I ensure that that thing gets set up? Right. So the moment you start thinking about how to solve how do you solve those business problems using different technologies, you start getting creative. And you can either start again if you want to hack it and build something that is an unserved need, fantastic. So if you're that type of a person who would want to essentially look at technology to solve those hardy problems, come for it.
Sure. That was a great summary. So thank you so much for your time today.
Awesome. Thank you, Deepa. Lovely being here.
Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please like and subscribe to our channel on YouTube or on any podcast platform. Follow us on LinkedIn at Through the Corporate Glass. You can leave us a comment on YouTube or send us feedback via our website, throughthecorporateglass.com. We would love to hear your feedback.